1986 Mount Hood Disaster Documentary. On May 12, 1986, at 3 a.m., 15 students from Oregon Episcopal School embarked on an experiential outdoor program called Base Camp. They are joined by 5 adults, including 2 school staff members, the mother of one of the students, and 2 guides. The group is led by a 42-year-old Episcopal priest and school chaplain, Thomas Gorman. They are about to ascend Mount Hood within the next several hours. However, none of them are aware of the horror that awaits them at the summit. Mount Hood, the 4th highest peak in the range, stands right in the middle of the volcanic arc that makes up the Cascades. It rises 11,249 feet above sea level. The students are required to summit Mount Hood within 12 hours as part of the school's curriculum, which includes a compulsory 1-day climb. After a few hours of hiking, the group reached an area where the temperatures were well above freezing. At about 6,000 feet, near the tree line, they waited in calf-deep snow and quiet darkness to begin a roughly 6-mile round trip. Daytime conditions on Mount Hood were not expected to be favorable. Meteorologists and news outlets had forecasted a significant storm with fierce winds and heavy rain that would linger for days. However, the group leader, Thomas Gorman, examined the conditions and concluded that the ascent could still be accomplished safely before the worst of the storms arrived. Some participants decided to turn around in the morning, even though visibility was good. The first pair to begin the descent were students Hillary and her mother, Sharon Spray. Hillary's stomach hurt and she wasn't sure she could make it to the summit. Sharon decided that her daughter's condition was not sufficient for the hike to continue. The leader pushed Hillary to go further and encouraged her to do so, but she refused. 18 people remained on the mountain and kept ascending. Upon reaching an elevation of 7,000 feet, 2 other participants voiced their wish to descend. Lorca Smetana, who was having seizures, begged Tom Gorman to terminate their climb. He did not commit the act, and the girl chose to return to the climbing station at Silcock's hut. Courtney Boatsman, another climber, accompanied her. Even in bad weather, the descent route was not dangerous. Before noon, Dee Zunyak, an outward-bound instructor, started rapidly losing her vision due to the dazzling snow reflecting sunlight. She had to descend with the assistance of the other 2 climbers. At 11:30 a.m., the group was eventually reduced to 13. 2 hours later, conditions started to turn for the worse. Ralph Summers, the tour guide, recommended taking a different path. But Thomas called for sufficient time to reach the summit and return before the weather turned. At 2 p.m., as they reached 11,000 feet, the wind increased in intensity, and it became too dangerous to remain outside. After noticing the visibility had dropped, Ralph Summers persuaded the leader to begin the descent. It was essential to round up the people to prevent them from getting left behind. The storm was gaining momentum as it made its way across the Pacific. Despite the hazardous conditions, the descent was still conceivable. At 3:30 p.m., after descending several hundred feet, the group's troubles worsened. Patrick McGuinness, the youngest climber, started to show symptoms of hypothermia. He stumbled into the snow and was unable to continue his journey. It became evident that the descent would not be easy from there. The range of visible objects had shrunk to between 20 and 30 feet, making it difficult to distinguish between the ground and the sky and making every step precarious. Given the circumstances, the students gave it their all. They encircled McGuinness and put him in the sole sleeping bag they had. In the end, the group was able to assist Patrick in warming up, but it took a great deal of time. Thomas Gorman steered the group 20 degrees off course to avoid the canyon and passed the compass on to the hikers in front of him. However, it sent them on the completely wrong course. The group then started to drift sideways rather than downward. When the group came to a halt at the brink of a severe breach of the ice, Guide Summers understood they were lost. Because the snow hid them, fissures like these were extremely dangerous. It was close to 7 p.m. and they were at an elevation of roughly 8,200 feet. The expedition found itself in a perilous predicament. It was quickly growing dark and the visibility was almost non-existent. The leader and the tour guide decided to create a snow-covered shelter for the students. Unfortunately, the cave's confines and ceiling height were inadequate, and only 8 people could fit inside. 5 additional people were left out in the storm, and they all took it in stride, switching shifts as necessary. The cave entrance had to be kept clean of snow at all times, and the students were responsible for doing this. Some people develop panic attacks and claustrophobia because of their suffocating surroundings. After being outside for so long, the leader lost all sense, and it became clear that he lacked the mental capacity to make judgments. Guide Summers made the call for assistance, and Molly Shula, a high school girl, volunteered to accompany him. They brought the bare essentials with them for the descent. They made it to the Good Meadows ski resort by 9:50 a.m. despite veering off Thomas's original route. As the storm continued, the cavers' spirits began to plummet. They had almost reached the point of hopelessness. The low oxygen content and heavy humidity made breathing difficult. Young people made an effort to keep the air flowing. The snowstorm had wiped out the shovel, so an icebreaker was used to dig it out. The mountaineers kept swapping out. Alison Lickerberger, Erin O'Leary, and Eric Sandvik emerged next. The snow persisted in its fury. Because the entrance to the shelter was buried in snow, they couldn't go back inside. It was bitterly cold, and these 3 were forced to stand outdoors. The remains of 8 more individuals were buried in the cave. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the first search team set off. After waiting for 3 hours, the Air Force's elite unit managed to catch up. They conducted the search in the worst of conditions. With the helicopter unable to be launched due to the considerable risk involved, the odds of success were significantly reduced. On May 14th, Mark Kelsey, who was in charge of the search and rescue operation, spotted 2 dark shapes in the snow. As he got closer, he saw the bodies of school children. Simultaneously, another team of rescuers located Sandvik's dead body. Only Clark and Thompson's bodies out of all the deceased displayed even the slightest trace of life. It was imperative that the surviving be rushed to a hospital, so a chopper took them there as soon as possible. Kelsey thoroughly investigated the victims' bodies' last resting places and discovered a link between them. The group explored the area thoroughly using avalanche probes. A chopper was transporting the bodies at the time. When the storm passed, it was apparent that the operation would fail because the snow would have covered any traces. But Sergeant Richard Harder was firmly pushed to keep looking for the missing people. It was a massive rescue operation, but only 2 students were saved. 7 others, along with 2 faculty members, died in the snow. The school ordered an official investigation, and the results placed primary accountability on Thomas Gorman for continuing in the face of dangerous conditions. Families of 7 deceased students received settlement offers, and in September 1986, one family brought a claim for wrongful death.